Hello, everyone. I am so excited for take 2 of Bible Study Live. Mac, did you say that you are on YouTube right now? Can you confirm that you can actually hear us?
That's a good idea. Let me unmute that. I keep that muted so I'm not hearing.
Yes, that's actually a great idea.
Can hear.
Yay! So, welcome everybody again. We are so excited to get started talking about Isaiah 53. We are welcomed by Mac. Hey, Carolyn.
What?
I am happy that you can hear us. So, anyway, I figured out let's get started by introducing ourselves. So, if y'all can tell me who you are and what's your favorite part about the Bible, since this is Bible Study Live. So that seems like a proper icebreaker. Mac, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Mack. I use he, him pronouns. And my favorite thing about the Bible. probably the number of weird questions that I don't expect to get to dive into and try to figure out before something like this. And I'll tell you more about that later.
Is that why you picked Isaiah 43?
This was just a happy accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, good stuff. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm Peter. Use they, them pronouns. I'm the Development and Communications Coordinator here at TMC. My favorite part about the Bible. I heard you at first saying my favorite part of the Bible. And I always have said my favorite book of the Bible is Acts because I like how messy it is. How it shows like
Let's go.
how how difficult and yet beautiful it can be to sort of be creating community, and building the kingdom, and how much we can kind of see ourselves in those early church communities. So I think that's my favorite part.
That is pretty cool. I like that. I was not. I mean, even if you would have answered, my favorite thing about the Bible is that it's a thick book, that would have been a completely fine answer. That being said, Peter said that they were working for TMC. What are you working for, Mac? Who are you?
It's a good question. I do not work for TMC. I volunteered. I met Mish and Mike and Melody recently at a conference and said, "Hey, do you still do those Bible studies?" Because I am a PhD student at the moment, working on New Testament, doing trans interpretations of some passages in John. And I'm a huge Bible nerd, so that's the
passages in John. Next month, we're going to do New Testament again. Listen, we have to do John. It's my least favorite book. We got to talk about this. This is great. Oh. I love it.
No pressure.
Least favorite in a good way. Not in a, I'll never read it. Not like so. It's my least favorite for different reasons. Oh,
okay, it's your most fun to fight with.
That's right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Awesome. My name is Mish. Pronouns are she, her. What were you asking again? Favorite breakfast food? Oh no, that was the other. My favorite part of the Bible. Now you give me. I thought literally just what you like about the Bible. Now I'm going to do a part as well. Joshua 13. It says, when Joshua was old and well advanced in years, God said, "Joshua, you are old and well advanced in years." Thanks, God.
Incredible.
Sometimes we need divine confirmation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just stopping in to point out the obvious.
Thanks. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. I totally have the wrong Bible study notes on my phone. So I'm going to find them. But yes. Oh, it's because it's not the 21st. It's the 28th, and we're doing it a week later. So as I said earlier already, we're going to do Isaiah 43. And since it's a pretty dense passage, we're just going to see how far we go. And Mac proposed to read it in chunks. So Mac even separated it in chunks. That's how much of a PhD student he is. Pretty impressive, just saying.
I did, and I consulted people to find out who and where do these things get split up.
Yes. Do you have a
time?
Exactly.
Does any I avoided writing that dissertation?
Mm-hmm.
I want to read that dissertation. Let's go.
Thank you.
Now you have to write it. I'm sorry.
Now I have to.
Does any of you have some background on Isaiah 43 and what it is and stuff like that?
I have some. Peter, do you?
No, go for it.
All right. Yeah, just a couple of background facts that might be fun. Typically, Isaiah gets broken up into 3 or so books. Not really, but kind of books. And this, what we're looking at right now, is called Deutero-Isaiah or Second Isaiah. And they are sort of chronological. So the beginning one you have as before the exile. This one is during the exile, and then you notice a few chapters on in the 50s, suddenly we're starting to talk about coming back from exile and how everybody's been saved, and that's great. So that one's post-exilic. So right now we are during the exile, which makes a lot of sense further on in the chapter. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, that's, I think, the important background for now.
That's cool. That's cool. I of course had some fun Jewish facts. Our Bible does not have Isaiah in the same position as the Christians. So in your Old Testament, our Tanakh, we have it as the fifth book in the prophets, in the Nevi'im part. That's what Tanakh stands for: Torah, Nevi'im, Chetuvim. So that's that. Oh yeah, I always find it like interesting or semi-important to pardon, mention that who was Isaiah prophesying to. Because I guess as an American, I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Not too much on a tangent, but Americans are so far removed from the geography there, but there was actually a northern kingdom, Israel, and a southern kingdom, Judah. So this Isaiah was a prophet to Judah. So whenever Isaiah speaks of Israel, we need to ask ourselves, okay, who are they talking about right now? Are they talking about the children of Jacob in general, the people of Jacob, or are they talking about the northern kingdom? Or sometimes Judah is referred to as Israel. Not to make it complicated at all, but that's what you have scholars for, like Mack. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so let's just get started with the first of the four chunks. Do we have a volunteer to read verses 1 through 7?
I can read it.
Let's go.
All right. I am reading from the NRSV Updated Edition. But now this is what the Lord says: He who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt for your ransom, Cush and Seba in your stead. Since you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you, I will give people in exchange for you, nations in exchange for your life. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bring your children from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth, everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made.
Ooh-wee. That went a lot of directions in one go, right?
I know there's a lot just in those first 7 verses.
Is this positive or what is going on here? There's some interesting stuff. Can you
sure.
why do you think the first chunk is 1 through 7, Mac? Or not, why do you think? That makes it sound like I'm questioning you. Why did you pick 1 through 7?
Sure. It's a fair question. Well, as I was reading about this, this is a section that nobody argues with, which I think is interesting. Most commentators look at this section and say 1 through 7. And the reason is because this seems to be it was called Salvation Oracle in a lot of places, which I think sounds very cool. And it has a lot in common with prophetic calls for various other prophets. And they have a few like very sort of trademark things. And usually it's I created you, sort of like this initial like claim on whoever is being called. And then sort of like this reassurance of like a promise that you're not gonna, in this case, drown, which is good. And yeah, so it's this like introductory passage, sort of calling Jacob or Israel into this sort of prophetic role. I think is really cool.
That's pretty interesting, actually. Salvation Oracle. I like the sound of that. Should
Yeah.
I like the sound of that? I mean, it sounds cool.
Yes, it's a good thing. I mean, in a few verses, it might it might not seem that way anymore, but for this chunk, for this first chunk, it seems very positive.
Yeah, yeah. I love it, Carolyn. Immediately pointing something out when I was studying this like last week before we doing it. People
Mhm.
in your place, literally, Carolyn. Here it is. Are we going to talk? This is what I wrote in my notes. Are we going to talk about what the claim here is? Um, wait, where was it again? People. What verse was that again?
It's
Three and also 4.
mhm.
Yes, yes, yes. I will give you Egypt as ransom. I mean, this seems to imply that we are in debt and that we need ransom. And then, of course, the giving people in exchange. Like when you were reading that, Peter, I was already giggling a little bit because that's
Uh-huh.
pretty.
Doesn't
What?
sound great.
Yep.
Like we do all agree that in order to impress you, Peter, I don't need to give you Peter people in exchange.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Oh my everything.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, like the juxtaposition of something that sounds, pretty jarring and disturbing, and then this like beautiful language at the beginning about, do not fear, I have called you by name, the sort of like lyrical quality of that, and then it goes into the, this like violent idea of what that means.
Right. What is the exegesis here? Is that normal speech or so where we try to woo people? Like I'm thinking, like Jacob had to work 7 years and give his life, and then he was given, you know, flock and people, which was already weird in Genesis. But is that how we should understand it within the culture or so? Not that I'm making this good or so, but what do y'all think?
I saw two different sort of ways of thinking about it, neither of which I think sort of solves the problem for me. But one of them was talking about sort of this idea of like this, at best, servant, in reality, probably more enslavement relationship between God and Jacob and Israel, which then sort of progresses more into sort of family, and then seems to sometimes slip back into sort of this enslavement model instead. And so this part, this idea of the redeeming part, would be part of the enslavement model of um, leaving one enslaver and going somewhere else, and then deciding or asking to be put with somebody else, only to decide that that's not where you want to be anymore, and getting bought back. Is that redemption idea, which I don't think solves the problem for me. That's still not a model I want when I'm talking about God. Still bad. And the other thing is that these particular countries here are included, and these particular people groups are here because one theory goes that these are various peoples and nations that Judah could have aligned themselves with in order to avoid going into exile, but didn't. And that's a good thing because they were trusting in God instead of that. Again, doesn't solve the problem for me, but
yeah, I'm a little bit reminded about Dan McClellan's reel a while ago, where if people don't know who Dan McClellan is, he's like
you should look him up.
PhD in old Hebrew cultures. He reads the Bible like I do too, pretty thick grain of salt. But what I did like about how he approaches verses like this is where he says, if you are okay today with thinking that slavery is not okay, right? Like if you reject slavery, which we all should, even though you take the Bible seriously, then maybe also considering including queer people, as like obviously our views and our values and our cultures changed. So maybe something else. I mean, slavery is even mentioned in the New Testament. Are we not going to talk about that or so? So I think that's a very positive, for me, redemptive thing. Instead of trying to make this a positive verse saying, oh, that was rough, that's dirty laundry, and we moved away from it, fortunately, let's please be
Mhm.
done with this. And now, are there other things? Because we were blindsided once back in the days. Maybe we're blindsided today too with our like approach on queerness. The Bible says this and that, if that makes sense. So whenever I hear slavery in the Bible, I think about that verse and think, wow, A, too much damage has been done in the name of the Bible, and B, what other blind spots do we have? So, yeah, Dan McClellan.
Yeah, we don't need to find an interpretation of every verse that, you know, we can accept now.
Yeah,
We're just unacceptable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
It's so interesting because you are precious to me and honored, and I love you. And in the same verse, I will exchange what you said earlier, Peter. It just can't, I can't get over it. And we use it in liturgy, in Hebrew liturgy, specifically certain terminology whenever there's endearment term. So here, Yakarta be'enai, like you are dear in my eyes. We have multiple prayers where we appreciate God in Judaism, where we use those phrases. But then I'm like, oh, okay. Fortunately, they cut the verse in half. Uh, yeah, because it's so beautiful. It's a in Hebrew. It's a even today. It's it's how you would call your child. Like when you say, "Hey, sweetie, come here," that the same term of endearment there. So that's why it's so weird. Ugh, hardcore.
Yeah. Well, and we can still find that beauty and that intimacy in those first few verses too. I mean, the sort of uh, I think maybe part of the reason that this is a passage that was good for us to discuss is because of that whole idea of naming,
Yeah,
and God calling us by name. Because I think for many of us trans folks, like being named or choosing a name or finding a name is a very like beautiful and profound thing, and can even be a holy thing for, depending on what your experience is.
yeah.
um I read a sermon by J. Hume, who's a poet, a trans poet, on this passage, among others, that he gave for Trans Day of Remembrance.
Mm,
So I'm just going to read this little passage from that sermon because I thought it was just a very good distillation of like why those first couple of verses are so can be seen as so significant for trans folks.
thanks.
And so we are trans not in spite of God, but because of God. To be trans and to transition, whatever that means for you, is to partake in some small way in that wondrous act of creation. Just as we create art and music, just as we create by human hands the bread and wine that will soon be laid on this altar, in some small way we help to create ourselves, guided by God, gifts from God, our true selves called and created, named and known. And as we give up our old names, shed them in this act of mirroring creation, we move from deceiving ourselves as to the truth of ourselves, joining bodily in this act of creation. Not an act of rebellion, but an act of faith, an act of intimacy with God, entwining ourselves in this tangle of creation, becoming unafraid. So I really loved, especially like how he tied, the being named with that call, do not fear. You don't have to fear because you have been named and been called by name.
Oh my. Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty. What's that English word? Huge. Let me just say huge because I can't find that word, but that's pretty huge. I
Yeah.
think that's important to, exactly like you said, highlight that we have these problems in the text. Okay, how do we interpret this for today? What can we use with it today? And I appreciate that you saying that. I think naming ourselves, like Mish is not my birth name. So there, I mean, I would estimate a guess that the majority of us in this community has a different name from birth. But I am certain that God calls me by this name,
Right. Same.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that it's sort of, if we're going with the like, oh, this beginning part is like a prophetic call. I love that the calling you by name is a part of that. Part of
Mm,
like calling you into what you're supposed to be, what you are going to do. Part of that is also claiming who you are and claiming that name. Um, I think that
Ooh,
that's such an important sort of preliminary before you get into anything that you're supposed to do. This is who you are.
like naming ourselves and following that part as part of obedience. D-
Yeah.
That's pretty revolutionary for me to hear. I love that. I'm going to think about that.
yeah, I really like that too. It being connected to like almost like a mission. Yeah, something you're being called to. I was actually had a translation question related to that because I noticed in the NRSV it translates it as "I have summoned you by name," which I think I've usually heard it as "I have called you by name." So summoned actually, has a little bit more of that implication in the way I read it, of like you're being called into something, not just like called by a name, but called into some work,
Hmm.
called to go forth somewhere.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to bring up the fact that some translations have I have called you by your name, and others have I have called you by name, and others have I have called you by my name.
Oh,
Karati
That's,
Veshimecha. Veshimcha.
yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely by your name. And
that's what I
karati
thought
is,
when I was looking at the Hebrew.
yeah,
And yet,
karati means to call out. I mean, it
yeah,
could mean this is a call. Yeah, this is a call. So it could be proclaim, but in technically it should be call.
how is it different than the phrase in 7 where it my mind translated it as everyone who is called by my name?
Um, linked. I would say linked. It's hanikra, which is still the same roots. Kara. So you could still say it called by my name, but now it's not a call anymore. So
Oh, so
I
those are so called and what's being translated as called and summoned in the NRSV is
say,
different.
yeah, same Hebrew word, but a different verb tense. I will not bore you with that. There, my Hebrew teacher laughed and said, "This is always the case unless there is an exception, and there's always exceptions in Hebrew." Um, but I wonder, do you know how good is your verb tenses, Mac? Is hanikra, is that pual or kal still? Um, and if you have no clue
was
what
that
I'm
the one
talking
in
about,
7 or 1?
the one in 7, hanikra.
The one in 7, I think it's Mifal. Let me look.
Okay, then it's like, then it would be more possessive to be proclaimed, to be called to yourself. How did you say that your translation have it?
Mine says called by my name in 7 and summoned you by name in 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's Mifal.
Okay, yeah, then it's definitely, oh, my progesterone alarm. Something we all know, right? If you are on progesterone. Yeah, okay. Don't forget to take out your trash can, is what my speaker says right now. Um, if you all heard that, please remind me in the chat later that I have to take out the trash. Okay, yes, yes. It's both the same root word and it both has to do with proclamation and calling. I would still translate it with calling, but in both cases it is by well, the first one is by my name. In verse 1 it's by your name, and in verse 7 it's by my name.
Mm-hmm.
So you are called by my name, which I have no clue how to translate without some study time. And then verse 1 is called by your name. I hope that helps.
It's kind of interesting that this section starts with "I'll call you by your name" and then ends with "I'll call you by my name."
Ooh.
Interested by
I
that.
kind of like it. For me, it's sort of for me, the way I think about it is like, you know who you are, and then you know who you sort of belong to, as in like community. You belong to yourself, but you also belong to a bigger community, and both things are important and true.
Yeah, I like that.
So quickly before we move to the next verse, Carolyn says here in the chat, wait, I can do this. Whoa, listen, y'all. I feel so fancy now. That poem Peter read reminds me of how Rowan Williams writes about how the baptismal identity is pure gifts. Oh, wow.
Mm.
That is pretty cool. Yes. See, this is when we come up with new liturgies. Ah, that makes me emotional. Sorry. This is when those new liturgies I really feel are so important. Huge. I'm just gonna say huge again because I can't think of the English word.
Mhm.
It's so special. Yes, I like this a lot. See, we redeemed these first verse sevens. First 7 verses. Done.
Yep.
Us 3 together with the folks in the chats. We solved the world's problems all this time. Nice. Let's do another chunk. I think we definitely have time for another chunk. So the next chunk is verses 8 through 15. Any takers?
I can.
Yay.
I'm reading from the NRSV, not the updated edition, because I don't have that in hard copy yet.
It's controversial.
I know. All right, verse 8. Bring forth the people who are blind yet have eyes, who are deaf yet have ears. Let all the nations gather together, and let the peoples assemble. Who among them declared this, and foretold to us the former things? Let them bring their witnesses to justify them. And let them hear and say, it is true. You are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, so that you may know, I jumped into KJV there for a moment, so that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me. I am the Lord, and besides me there is no Savior. I declared and saved and proclaimed when there was no strange God among you, and you are my witnesses, says the Lord. I am God, and also henceforth I am he. There is no one who can deliver from my hand. I work, and who can hinder it? Thus says the Lord your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake I will send to Babylon and break down all the bars, and the shouting of the Chaldeans will be turned to lamentation. I am the Lord your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King.
Just my eyes went big right away. And the Chaldeans shall raise their voice in lamentation. Like,
Yeah,
yo,
we're back into some violence.
Mhm.
that's friendly. Same question as the first portion, Mac. Why did you pick this block?
So there are actually discrepancies about this one. Some folks want to keep 14 and 15 on their own because they're breaking up this chapter by thus says the Lord's, and to like make it be like, oh, and this is a statement and then this is a statement. But 14 and 15 are kind of their own little thing. And so if it wouldn't be a silly sized block for this, I probably would have also separated 14 and 15. Yeah, this one, I think very much, it looks like a trial scene to me. Like we're in some sort of courtroom, and God wants Israel and Jacob to testify that God's the only God. And my question about that is, God's the only God, then who are we arguing with?
That's a very good question. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange framing. I mean, it sounds like it's a typical framing, but it seems like a strange framing from at least the way I understand God is like why does God need to defend themselves or like what is God trying to prove here?
It
Yeah.
does very much feel like some sort of like competition of like, well, tell them I did it. Tell them
Yeah.
I was here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a vain person. Which again makes me wonder, is this the way this culture wrote? Is this the way people understood literature? Is this, yeah, again, right? Also, that verse that I just laughed about, I shouldn't laugh about because it's pretty horrible, but it's just such a brutal burn. Yes, you will raise your voice in lamentation. I'm gonna use that from now on. When somebody says something nasty to me on Instagram, that's literally my copy pasta. Also, Carolyn, very very Jewish of you. Um, this is what Jews literally ask always. Blind who have eyes, like I assume it's a metaphor, as many blind people still literally have their eyes. It's like, which makes me first wonder, what does it actually say? What does the term blind do you have the Hebrew in front of you, Mac? I have it in a different tab.
I
That's so
do. Let me
interesting.
look.
It's like, God, do you understand blindness? Because that actually is not how it works.
It seems like it's saying people who could see if they wanted to, but choose not to.
Right. That's probably the
Intentionally
metaphor.
not allowing themselves to see the truth.
Blind though it has eyes. So verse 8. Yes.
I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation because it's been a while, but Eur?
Eur, yeah, am Eur ve'inayim yesh.
Yeah.
That's very well translated. Okay, yeah, womp womp.
Yeah.
I was hoping that there was some redemption here, but no, Carolyn.
It's
Wow.
pretty much
Yeah, I
what
mean
it looks like.
that must have been the metaphor in that time. Exactly like
Well, it
what
reminds
Peter
me.
said.
I'm like I said, I'm working in John right now, and it reminds me a lot of the end of John 6, which is Jesus heals the man who is born blind, and at the end, Jesus is going off at the Pharisees in this case about how they are still blind, and they all look at each other and be like, "Are we supposed to be the ones who are blind? Like, what is he talking about?" And so I've been doing a lot about the fact that like this gets pulled forward into like modern interpretation so much, and you end up with so much ableism because blindness becomes the same as disbelieving or not understanding. And this metaphor just gets pulled forward and pulled forward. We still hear it in phrases like tone deaf, same situation of like, oh, we compare deafness or blindness with not understanding and ignorance. And
yeah, that's important to
acknowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Carolyn actually follows up as well. Nancy Iceland may have written about this in The Disabled God. That is such a good thing. You know, I feel like I should get more into this because I had a lot of I just have a lot of, I was about to say blind spots. I said that earlier, right? That's another metaphor that is rooted in that. Like as if blinds, why would you use blind spots? That is, I'm happy that we are catching this live right now because this is exactly the problem, that it's rooted in such old literature, if you will. And they're trying to make a point. Okay, now if we were to translate the Bible today, how would we make this metaphor still say the same without using ableist language?
yeah, I think of like willful ignorance instead, like something like you have the capacity capacity to understand, but you choose not to. Something
Mhm.
like that.
Exactly. Right, exactly. Willful ignorance. Yeah, I like willful ignorance. Does the NRSVU updated edition not address this, Peter?
No, it's the same. That's one section that is the same.
Got it. Yeah, I want more. I want more, Carolyn. Send me the slides. Carolyn says that they have a disability justice presentation. Listen.
That's great.
Also, I never knew that was a cute cat in the in the picture. Yes, I want the disability liberation theology presentation from last year as well, please, Carolyn. Just saying. Just saying. Anyway, we didn't even get started digging too deep in this chunk because oh my everything. Already so much. What notes did you have on this, Peter? Did you have notes on this?
I don't think I had notes on this chunk. I've got some for the next one.
Yeah. The only notes that I noticed specifically in verse 9, right? Maybe it's talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom a little bit earlier, but now all of a sudden it's moving towards all the nations. Like all the nations assemble as one. It's not about two nations anymore, not Judah and Israel. People gather who among declared this. So and it's again one of those funny verses. So this is JPS translation, by the way, not the updated. I'm sorry, just like the NRSV. Who among them declared this, foretold to us the things that have happened? Let them produce their witness and be vindicated. This language.
I like it. I imagine God sort of throwing like a temper tantrum, but with big words.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it does sound a little like petulant.
Better start raising your voice in lamentation.
Yeah, it's such like stark differences from the section right before it, and I kind of enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then verse 15, the last part, I'm the Holy One, your Lord, your King, the Creator of Israel. But when I read this in either ESV or NRSV or so, and they use the term sovereign. Yeah, that's just, I don't know if it's me, but whenever I hear sovereign, I insta trigger. I don't know, is that because help a Jewish person out here? Is sovereign, the term sovereignty, is that typical to Lutheranism, Calvinism, but then like the non-inclusive version?
I feel like that's not a term that I've really come across that often.
I think it was an attempt to maybe which translations did you say you found it in?
I think when I was studying it, I was reading ESV probably.
Okay, because my first thought was maybe this was an attempt to like degender king, and make it a gender neutral term for royalty. But if it's the ESV, that translation is a little old to be trying to do that. Yeah, all I can think of is trying to go with a gender neutral version of king.
Yeah.
What's your association with sovereignty, Mish?
It's just that standard thing that the discussion ender. Yeah, God is sovereign, Mish. Yeah, but that didn't answer my question.
Right.
Oh, like a predestination, or like well, don't ask too many questions. God's got it figured out, and you don't need to worry about it situation.
Yeah. I'm just like long time ago when we treated Calvinism back in the days, right? I just remember something about like God's sovereignty being the most important thing, but I am going to insult every Calvinist right now by saying that. So take this with a grain of salt, oh ye who is watching this right now. Yes.
The sovereignty of God is the big question, and what are you going to do?
Yeah. I I mean, I guess it fits with a god, right? Like if God is God, then
He's
it
very
kind of
much in
speaks,
this conception
right?
of God.
Yeah, yeah,
If this is not your conception of God, maybe your God is not sovereign. But for these folks in this situation, they definitely believed in a God who allowed them to get taken off to exile and then was going to vindicate them and cause their enemies to cry out in lamentation. So,
again, again,
It does seem like there was probably some comfort to be found in that idea, especially if you were sort of, under a had been or subject to a power that was not by choice. To say, okay, well, you say you have control of me now, but the true sovereign is God, and there's something, maybe tied to their liberation in that.
yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the other note that I made. In verse 11 and 12, none but me, the Lord, besides me, none can grant triumph. So the note that I made was, I think I was salty. I don't know. Y'all can see the note, but there's this whole sense of like, oh, we gotta make sure that America does not become a cesspool of sinners. We have to take control. That this God, but if you're an inerrantist and the Bible is literal to you, none but me, the Lord, can give triumph. So we can't do anything. If you're an inerrantist, right? You'll have to continue with your inerrantist's doctrine and say that God is the only one that can give triumph. Okay, see, Peter, 2 moments of redemption today. You just redeemed the word sovereign for me.
I'm not even trying to redeem much of this passage, believe me.
You did it. You can't stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as always, just kind of thinking about the context and what this why this kind of language might have been used, both because it was just a cultural reality, but also like why it might have been interpreted differently in a way that actually brought comfort, as opposed to bringing up to us this idea of like a tyrant or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess this tyrant doesn't sound good. Although tyrant was just a word that they used back in the days. It didn't mean necessarily a bad king. We think of tyrants of bad kings now, but yes, tyrant was a form of leadership. Tyranny was a form of leadership, a
Yeah.
well accepted form of leadership. Let's see. I think we could do one more chunk. I'll take the last one. Verses 16 through 21, I believe. Oh, it's not. Is it the last one? No, it's not even the last one.
No, I
It's
think
just the next one. So again, JPS, thus said the Lord, who made a road through the sea and a path through mighty waters. I'm giggling because my daughter is literally singing super loud in her bedroom. I don't think y'all can hear it, but it's hilarious. Who destroyed chariots and horses and all the mighty hosts. They lay down to rise no more, y'all. Y'all is not in the JPS. They were extinguished, quenched like a wick. Do not recall what happened of old, or ponder what happened of yore. I'm about to do something new. Even now it shall come to pass. Suddenly you shall perceive it. I will make a road through the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild beasts shall honor me, jackals and ostriches, for I provide water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, to give drink to my chosen people, the people I formed for myself, that they may declare my praise. Ooh. Sorry. Every time I read Isaiah, I giggle. You see, this time it's like wild animals, like ostriches. That's not the first animal that comes to mind when I think of wild animals.
Okay, but Mac, you have to talk about how this was translated in the
yes, this is
KJV.
so much fun. So much fun. The
Tell
KJV
me.
does not have jackals and ostriches. The KJV has dragons and owls. And I think that that's one, like, first of all, dragons, like, that's really fun. But two, like, what a combination of animals to put next to each other. Dragons and owls. Like, yes, because I see those together all of the time. Great. I love it. And I was doing some digging and trying to figure out how in the world we get jackals or wild dogs in some translations and dragons. And the answer seems to be that when the KJV was translated, now this is from, I've not done a full length study, so you'll have to forgive me if I get some of the details here wrong. But when KJV was getting translated, the word for jackal, or the word that gets translated as jackal, and the word that gets translated as serpent most places, or dragon, look super similar, and sound very similar. And let me see if I can get them. It's like tanim and tananim or something. There's an extra syllable in there, and so they're not. Now they're thinking that these are not the same words. Whereas before they were like, oh, it's the same. It's the same. For the older translations. And I was like, well, no, those are two separate ones. They just look super similar.
Oh, I see. Yeah, tanim. Yeah. I don't know what that word even means.
Exactly.
If I quickly look at my lexicon, it just says jackals or dragon or sea monster. And then it says meaning uncertain. It's like, if the meaning is uncertain,
pick one anyway. And I just feel like if you could have picked one anyway, why didn't you pick dragons?
Yes. And then the other one, Uvanot Yana, which is like daughters of owls. That's literally what it says. Why did it become ostriches? Like, are ostriches daughters of owls?
I think they were going with, we got to find like things that happen more in the wilderness, in the desert. And when was the last time you saw a screech owl in the desert, I guess? I don't know, but I just love that they were like, we need two animals. And it feels like they just reached into a hat.
Yes.
Aside from this just being like entertaining and, you know, having to do with dragons, which is always great, it is kind of a good reminder of like how translation works. And, you know, things that get missed or things that get kind of twisted around a little bit, or that we, you know, realize an error was made and fix it later, you know.
And then they make a big difference.
Yeah.
Because dragons get pulled on through for like the rest of the Bible and all of church history. And if you believe that there are dragons in Isaiah, that really does well with your future beliefs of dragons as being symbolic of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to go with dragons.
John Milton.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, dragon sounds way cooler.
It does.
And if we are the council of how we're going to translate the Bible moving forward, dragon sounds cooler than jackals. I don't know.
Especially, are we saying we are the new Nicaea? Because that feels like a big claim.
That's right. That's right. We are the new Nicaea. And just saying,
we're put into our Instagram reel tomorrow.
Yes, exactly.
we are the new Nicaea. That's the claim.
Do it, please.
Okay.
And when I say dragon, I mean Asian dragons.
Okay.
Like Naga type of dragon, because
like
just saying, Western dragons are boring.
It's important to be aware of what kind we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So glad we got that clarified. Yeah. Before we run out of time, I noticed Carolyn's comment, which I think is a really good one. I hate the idea of being told not to remember history.
Yeah.
Because I really noticed that part of this passage as well. And I noticed your comment, Mack, in our notes that, you know, it's funny that God's encouraging us to remember for like this first big chunk of this, and then suddenly it's like, now forget it all, you know. And I've always found that the verse, I'm doing a new thing, I've always found really meaningful. Like I kind of return to that a lot, and it's really kind of like speaks to me of liberation and of the new world being built that is not going to resemble this world and its injustices. But there's something there about being told to forget history that feels a little uncomfortable, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, the way I sort of always sort of read it, because I don't like that idea of like, and I don't think it makes sense with the passage, because it's like, let me recount to you history and all the things I've done, and now never
Mhm.
mind.
Yeah.
I sort of think of maybe like, don't dwell on the history.
Mm.
Like, don't,
Right.
like the past victories, the past salvations, like, yes, those happened, but don't dwell there, because I've got more things coming, new things coming.
Yeah.
I like that. But I don't like being told not to remember history either.
hmm
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah, he's cruel.
I was thinking about this too again, like just through the lens of our experience as trans people too, and sort of for me at least, like how do we participate in that new thing that God is doing while also finding ways to integrate with our past? And I think that's something, as someone who chose a new name at a certain point and started presenting to the world differently, and in some ways, like like found a new identity, to also like feel like my past is part of my past, and to be able to like integrate that and weave that in. Like how can we sort of use this to reflect on that idea?
Right. Oh man. I like, yeah. I think it's also important. Like I think Peter, you and I talked many times in our 4 months together about like the old me is still me.
hmm
Not only am I going to choose to keep on remembering what happened to the world and stuff like that, but also I will actively, in my case, this is a choice. I realize it's different for every trans and gender expansive person. I'm choosing to nurture that, if you will, relationship with my old self, if you want to call. I don't even know how to call it, so yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed. Yeah,
definitely.
like you said, I think it's different for everyone, like what that looks like, what
Yeah.
parts they want to, keep as part of themselves or hold on to or remember, and what parts they want to release, and
Hmm.
complicated.
Yeah, I think about it, especially like if I'm thinking about sort of the exile piece of this chapter, this idea of like them remembering
Yeah.
either one, like in this case, they're remembering a time when they were made free, a time when they were enslaved and then weren't anymore. And I think that, and now they're in exile and trying to imagine a time when that's happening again. And I think that can be, I think about the state of stuff for trans people right now. It can sort of feel like a bit of an exile, and thinking back of like, well, maybe was it better when I didn't know that these things were going to impact me, or when any of that stuff. And it can be easy to sort of think that way, but instead thinking in terms of like, well, that's a past and I can be grateful for it. I can integrate it however I need to. Again, like you said, Mish, personal choice. You deal with the history in whatever way works for you, but
Yeah.
looking forward and knowing though, like there's more victory, there's more liberation coming.
Right. Ah, good closing words. Good
Mhm.
closing words. Just saying. I know Micah Melody always likes to finish us up with some last takeaways and thoughts. So, Peter, do you have any takeaways or thoughts from the passage? From the Not even the passage, from this last hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find a better sort of concluding reflection than what Mac was just talking about. I think, yeah, that's probably what I'll come away with from this conversation the most, is that kind of, how do we balance remembering the past and participating in God doing a new thing, and like integrating those two things together.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. How about you, Mac? Any last words?
I don't think so. I think I like that we didn't try to rescue the text to death when
Mhm.
there's just, we just got to say that's not how I conceptualize God, and that's good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I doubt she's watching right now, but Dr. Gensch from UP SEM here in Richmond is busy writing a commentary on John, and she asked me, so what do you think of that? It's like, are you asking me, a Jew, what I think of you writing a commentary for John? It's like, yes, and I'm very, very curious about your true answers. Like, well, I struggle with John, probably, maybe Second Thessalonians, but those two, but John probably most, as a Jewish person. And this is what she said: for too long, and this is a professor in New Testament and has been teaching for, I don't know, 3 decades or so. And she said, for too long did we try to talk our dirty laundry clean. But
Mm.
dirty laundry is dirty laundry. I'm like, so is that what you're gonna do? So she was like, yes, the entire purpose of this commentary is to talk about dirty laundry. So yes, that would be my last comment as well. But also, thank you so much, Mac, for jumping on. For those who are wondering, where is Micah Melody? She is in a class right now because she's busy getting her MDiv and being smart and stuff like that. So we thought, do we know more smart people? And Mac said, I'll come on. So great. Thank you so much for saving the day. So you'll see Mac a couple more times in the future. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you for having me. This was very fun.
Absolutely. Peter, do you know the dates? You're the date person, right? When's the next Bible study live?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot.
Ah,
Let's see. I can find it quickly. Looks like our next one is March 20th.
all right, March 20th. It's pretty cool. I'm in the Netherlands then.
So who
I
knows
think
what
I'm
time
just
of day it'll be for you.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
But I don't want to disturb the flow, so I'm probably just still gonna make it.
You're brave.
Peter
Yeah.
is like, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll cut this interview down and put it on YouTube for the ones who missed it. And if you're watching this later, thank you as well. As you heard, we are trying to read the Bible and literally struggle with it together. We are not an organization that has answers. We're a plurality of people. And yes, thank you for everybody at TMC who has created this culture. I'm just here for the ride. So I will see you all next month.